Today we're going to talk about angles of elevation and depression. An angle of elevation is when we are going from the ground up to something, just like an elevator. You always take an elevator up. Yes, sometimes you take it down, but you first have to go up in it. And then angles of depression is when we are starting up and going down. I want to draw and label my triangle so that it will make it easy for you to set up these problems. So this is always going to be our slanted side, which is our hypotenuse. This is going to be our up, down side, and this is going to be our across. So you will see these words in each of these word problems. So straight across, which is this piece right here, some keywords that you would look for would be from the base, on the ground, from the foot, how far, and shadow. For straight up and down, some of the keywords you're looking for is how high or height, how tall, altitude, or above the ground. And lastly, the slanted. What you're looking for here is if they're talking about a ladder, a kite string, a wire, or something leaning. So we're going to look for those words as we begin solving these. So let's look at number 1 here. Number 1 says the angle of elevation from point A to the top of the cliff is 38. If point A is 80 feet from the base of the cliff, how high is the cliff? Okay, so here is how high is the cliff. So our cliff, I'm going to let this be our cliff right here, is our straight up and down. They want to know how high is the cliff, so I'm going to label that my X. Then it tells me if point A is 80 feet from the base, so from the base is across, so 80 feet from the base is point A. And then it tells me that the angle of elevation from point A. So we know that elevation is going up. So if we're looking from point A up to the top of the cliff, from here up till we reach the top, that would be 38 degrees. Now, we're going to use our trig functions on these. So if I'm looking from angle 38, I can see that X is my opposite side. I know that the slant is always my hypotenuse, but I'm not looking for my hypotenuse. And then my other side is my adjacent. So if I think back to my trig functions, and let's go ahead and write SOHCAHTOA up here so we have it for a point of reference. The only one that uses opposite and adjacent is tangent. So we would do tangent of, remember, our trig function and the angle are best friends, so you always have to put them beside each other. Tangent of 38 equals opposite, which is x, over adjacent, which is 80. So from there, I would want to put a 1 under this and then cross multiply. So when I cross multiply, I get x equals, and then I'm multiplying 80 times tangent 38. Remember, tangent 38 can't be separated or changed, so 80 goes in front. We get 80 tangent 38. If I plug that into my calculator, for x, I would get 62.5 feet. Okay, let's try another one. Let's look at number 2. So number 2, it says a ladder leaning against a house makes an angle of 60 degrees with the ground. So we have a house. Houses aren't slanted, they're straight up and down, right? And then we have a ladder leaning against this house. And it says a ladder leaning against a house makes an angle of 60 degrees with the ground. So the ladder and the ground make 60 degrees. So let me go ahead and draw my ground. And I know that right here, the ladder to the ground makes a 60-degree angle. It says the foot of the ladder is 7 feet from the foundation of the house. So there's the foot of, which means straight across. So that is 7 feet from the foundation. So this would be 7 feet. And they want to know how long the ladder is. So our ladder is right here. So if I'm looking from this angle again, my opposite doesn't actually have a measure. My hypotenuse is what I'm looking for, and then my adjacent is what I'm given. So if I look back up here at my trig function, I know cosine uses adjacent and hypotenuse. So I'd do cosine of the angle we were looking from, which is 60, equals adjacent, which is 7, over hypotenuse, which is x. Remember, you want to put this over 1 and cross multiply. So I'm going to do x times cosine 60, so that's going to give me x cosine 60, and then 7 times 1, which gives me 7. So I need x by itself so I can solve for it. Since these were multiplied, I know I can move cosine 60 away by dividing both sides by cosine 60. So this would go away, and if I plug 7 divided by cosine 60 in my calculator, that's going to give me x equals 14 feet. So this isn't much different from what you've been doing and how you've been solving. You just have to set it up correctly and draw it correctly. So let's try another one of those. Let's look at one where we're looking for the angle. So in number 3, it says a tree 40 feet high casts a shadow 58 feet long. So let me go ahead and draw my tree. So, I should probably draw it on 3. So my tree is 40 feet high, and it casts a shadow of 58 feet long. So a shadow, if you think about your shadow always appears on the ground. So it casts a shadow on the ground 58 feet long. They want us to find the measure of the angle of elevation of the sun. So, some kids last year struggled with this. If our shadow is facing this way, that means the sun has to be behind the tree. So, our sun's somewhere right here, and they want to know the angle of elevation from the ground to the sun. So we're looking for this piece here that goes up to the sun. So this angle right here is what we want to know. So if we look from that angle that we do not know, we know that 40 is my opposite, and we know that 58 is the adjacent. So looking back at our trig functions, I know that tangent is the only one that uses opposite and adjacent. So that would give me tangent, and remember our angle is x right now, equals opposite, which is 40, over adjacent, which is 58. Okay, so we want to solve for x, and the only way that we can split up tangent and its angle is to do the inverse. And so remember, the inverse is tangent -1. So if you're typing that on your calculator, you'd put second tangent of 40 divided by 58. When you plug that in, you should get x equals 34.6 degrees. Okay, so all of those have been angles of elevation. Now I want to show you one with angle of depression. So let's look at 5. It says, from the top of a tower, the angle of depression to a stake on the ground is 72. The top of the tower is 80 feet above ground. How far is the stake from the foot of the tower? So the first thing I want to do is I want to draw my tower. And you can just draw lines. I just like to make it fun and draw pictures. It says from the top of a tower, the angle of depression to a stake in the ground is 72. So this is going to be my stake. So if I am on top of this building, my eyesight is going out, but I want to look down at the stake. Let me redo that. That's not a very good line. So from the top of the tower down to the stake. So this angle of depression, which is going down, is 72 degrees. It says the top of the tower is 80 feet above the ground. So that means this is 80 feet tall. And they want to know how far is the stake from the foot of the tower. So remember, from the foot means straight across. They want to know this length right here. Okay, this 72 is not actually in the triangle, and I need it to be in the triangle so I can look from the point of reference of what 80 and 72 is. If you remember from our parallel lines unit, if I have two parallel lines that are cut by a transversal, then I have a bunch of angles that are equal. And so I know that alternate interior angles are equal. And so what's awesome about this is my line of sight, which is straight out, is parallel to the ground, which is straight. And then we can take this sight and let it be our transversal. And so if this piece right here is 72, that means this piece as well is 72. So we're always going to reflect it on the alternate interior angle. So now we can look from here. We have 72. I know that 80 is across from that, so this is my opposite. And then I also have my adjacent. So the trig function that we can use for that would be tangent. So we would get tangent of my angle measure, which is 72, equals opposite, which is 80, over adjacent, which is x. So when we multiply or cross multiply, that's going to give us x tangent 72 equals 80. So to get x by itself, so we can solve, we're going to have to divide both sides by tan 72. Tan 72 would cancel out, and we would get x equals 80 divided by tangent 72. Make sure you put this division sign in I saw a lot of people the other day doing 80 times tangent 72. If you do that, you're not going to get the right answer. So this should be x equals, when you plug that into your calculator, you should get 25.9. Okay. Let's try one more angle of depression just to make sure we know how to do it. So let's look at number 8. So in this one, it says the distance from a boat to the base at a lighthouse is 60 feet. Ellie is standing at the top of the lighthouse, which is 170 feet tall. Find the angle of depression. So we have our lighthouse here. I know it's 170 feet tall. The distance from a boat at the base of the lighthouse is 60 feet. So the base is this bottom piece right here. And there's a boat that is 600 feet from there. So let me draw my boat. And they want to know, they tell me Ellie is standing at the top, so Ellie's up here. Find the angle of depression. So right now, Ellie's line of sight is straight out, but we want to find the angle of depression from Ellie down to the boat. So from her line of sight down, we want to know this angle measure. Since this is outside the triangle, I know that Ellie's line of sight and the water or the ground below are parallel. So this counts as my transversal, which means I can reflect that angle measure inside. So looking from this point of view, I know that 170 is my opposite, 60 is my adjacent. And what you will notice about a lot of these is that we will end up using tangent very often. So again, tangent uses opposite and adjacent. So we do tangent of my angle measure, which is x, equals opposite, which is 170, over adjacent, which is 60. Remember, to separate a trig function and its angle measure, we have to do the inverse. And so the inverse would be tan negative 1. And so when you're typing that in your calculator, you'd put second tangent of 170 divided by 600. So when you type that in, you should get x equals 15.8 feet.